Hello everybody. Right, hope you're all well. Today what I want to look at is the urban world, and we're going to look at 2B. So this bit here where we've got the urban growth creates opportunities and challenges for cities in licks and knees. So we're going to work through this list. So the key bit with this is how the urban growth has created challenges. So you've got to focus on the city is growing, therefore created challenges. Don't just talk about challenges generally. And secondly, we need to work through this list. So if we all click on 2B, what we've got on here is the two textbook references. The Oxford textbook covers this well for Rio. Remember, this is all looking at Rio. The Hodder one does a different city, so stick with the Oxford textbook for this. There's a list of GCSE questions. Some I've made up. Some of them are from real exams and others are from sample papers. And at the bottom there, you've got an answer to that question, and you've got a couple of pupil answers as well as one by me. So you can look at those, and you probably want to read those before you get started so you know exactly the kind of thing you'll be facing with this section. Right. I've reordered this slightly from the content because I think it's easy to study it in the order which is on this sheet. So to begin with, like it says at the top here, we're going to focus on how urban growth creates the challenges and then why these challenges are difficult to manage. So the hardest question really is looking at the extent to which these challenges are difficult to manage, what makes them difficult to manage. Luckily, they've all got something in common. As the city grows, it's added more and more people, and that's created most of the challenges which we're going to be studying. So you can always jump back to that to explain why we've got a challenge. Now, I've done a few of these for you to show you how I would approach it, but obviously you can go your own way up to a point. So, first one, managing urban growth, slums and squatter settlements. Well, the slums and squatter settlements in Brazil are called favelas, which is in brackets there. Got a few page references. I'm just going to shut this other doc. You've got a few page references here and book references. You might want to look at this video, Life in the Favela. Rochina is the biggest favela in Brazil, so particularly Rio, so feel free to have a look at that. So the challenge of the growth in slums. So the favelas have grown, and that's because of rural to urban migration and natural increase. So it's the same reasons the cities grew, so you can jump back to that. If you wanted to make it specific, which is always a good idea with the case studies, is a lot of these people are coming in from the Amazon because it's been hit by droughts. That's partly attributed to climate change. Anyway, that means we've added 5 million people. Now that's in your textbook right at the beginning of the Rio chapter, where there's a graph showing you that since the 1950s, the population's grown by 5 million people. And this has led to a chronic or a severe shortage in housing. So all these people arrive and there isn't enough houses. So the result, 2 million people build their own homes without planning permission on the least desirable land, which is often steep, it's not as well drained, it might be areas where nobody else wants to live. Sometimes it's really low lying, so when the rains hit it, they flood more readily. So that creates challenges because you've got lots of poorly built housing. If you imagine you having to arrive and build your own house, that's kind of you would have very similar problems in the sense that you can't really put pipe work in. You don't really know how to do the electrics. Also in these areas, you tend to get high unemployment because people have just arrived. They haven't got the right skills. A lot of them would be Amazon dwellers and farmers and so on. They tend to be very high crime, not because these people are evil or anything, but just because there's a lack of law and order. There's a lack of policing. Health is poor because of the poverty and lack of healthcare, as it goes on to say, and there's a lack of sanitation, sewage, running water, and all the other services. I perhaps should add electricity there and energy as well. We could write energy connections in there. That's the challenge. So for all of these, the whole list, if we go back to the objectives, all of these, you need to explain why that challenge exists. But it's very similar for all of them. So clean water, sanitation, and energy, we could nearly say the same thing, but just link it to the whole city. Anyway, going back to this. So the next little bit, because this is called managing urban growth, we've got to look at how this is being done. Now, your textbook does this quite well, but if we just go back to the content, here we've got an example of how urban planning is improving the quality of life for the urban poor. It makes sense to put managing this with this example, because if we choose an example which is in a slum, then all of a sudden we've managed this problem and we've shown how it's been done and we've done the example. So if we jump back, the first thing is, in terms of managing the slums, is to upgrade and provide services for them. They used to, pre-1980, decide the best solution they thought was to destroy them, but they realised this just moves the problem on and doesn't really deal with the issue. So anyway, if we're looking at an example, so this is an example of where they've dealt with a favela, and it's called the Barrio Project in the Complexo del Amero, which is the area which has been taken and then people's lives have been improved. So it answers, within this example, how generally across the city the urban poor and slums and favelas have been managed. So other little bit just to mention here is it mentions quality of life. So you need to know what that means. It could well, and it probably will in the exam, ask you how this has been achieved in an example, how they actually improve quality of life. So you'll have to link it to quality of life. So you can't just talk about improving water supply, you would then need to explain how that improves quality of life. For example, a better water supply, well, I would say that's essential for anybody to have a reasonable quality of life, because without a good water supply, you're never free from the threat of disease. You might have to watch your children drink water which is not clean. You might have to even watch somebody you know die because they've not got clean water. And piped water is obviously not just about drinking, it's about washing, sanitation, and so on. So quality of life is a definition. There are lots of them around. I've tried to find a nice simple one you can follow. There's a more complex one on my notes, which are in here. But quality of life is all about general well-being of people. And then you've got lots of things it might include, like physical health and so on, which is all listed there. So to have health, I would say you need clean drinking water. And just while we're on this, like it says and it's highlighted here, you've got this whole list of things you've got to look at in terms of how we're going to deal with all these things. If you're quite clever about this, you can nearly use this one example to nearly show how, not the environment as much, but some of the environmental stuff as well, is how all of these and some of the environmental stuff has been managed. So you could nearly do it all just with this one example if you wanted to. So the first job for you is to have a look at the Oxford textbook on page 162. Well, it's 162 and 161. 161 goes through the challenges which we've just done. So we can look at how these buildings built on these steep hillsides and so on. But the way they're being improved is on this double page. So all you need to do is use this to show how they're dealing with the squatter settlements. And you've got the green box here, loads of ideas, and then this box here. Now this cable car system, there's also a video on that on one of the references here, where you've got the cable car there. You may have seen it in a video some time ago I showed year 9. Anyway, so the first job is to show how this is improving the quality of life of the urban poor. So you just need to use this bit of the textbook to show how these things are going to improve quality of life. And you've also got ideas across the city in all the slum upgrade projects. aspects of these. Okay, second bit, providing clean water, sanitation and energy. So what I've done here is model how to do all of these. So I've got it down to something which I can revise from. So like with all of these, the challenge here is you've got 5 million extra people since 1950. 2 million are living in favelas, which are these houses which have been built by people which haven't got services. A lot of them haven't got sewage and so on. So for nearly every challenge you've got, you could state that. So if you think about health, education, unemployment, crime, it all comes back down to this urban growth because it's been so quick. So pre-2000, 12% had no piped water, a third had no sanitation and sewage. Think about what that means and what it would mean in Wakefield if a third of you didn't have a toilet and flushing toilets which takes sewage away. What would happen to the River Calder here? Energy blackouts are quite regularly because they've got an aging energy grid which is again not keeping up with population growth. The result, if you remember that big bay area, Guanabara Bay, is polluted with sewage, lots of raw sewage poured into that. When they held the Olympic Games, they were really worried about the sailing competition there, and there's loads of stories on the internet about that, which are really interesting. People have to collect water, buy from street vendors, which costs money, or it costs time. I mean, the time it takes, if you have to carry all your own water from distance, it can take hours out of your day. That particularly affects women normally, because they're normally the ones that have to get it, or children who are doing that rather than going to school. They also have a problem with electric being stolen from the grid. It's quite dangerous wiring up live electric cables from the grid to your house, but that's what a lot of people do. So managing this, well, once you've done the barrier project above, they already do this. They've managed all three of these there, so you could use that as your example. But across the city, we've had 7 new treatment plants built, I mean there's less pollution. But what I'm showing is how this is solving the issue, which is really quite important. So there's less pollution in the bay. 300 kilometres of pipes results in more piped water and sewage. 95% now have mains water. There's 160 kilometres of new electricity, new wires added to the grid. So that means more people are collected and it's becoming more reliable. But one of the biggest projects is this power station, this hydroelectric power station complex, which is going to create significantly more power, which is then going to hopefully transform the power problem they've got in Rio. That's the plan anyway. And additionally, as they're building houses like these social apartments, there's been 400,000 built with solar systems. So that's managing it, but you can see it's still very difficult. So it's really difficult to manage. To what extent? So that's one question, asking you the extent to why this is difficult to manage, and then what's actually being done. So we've also got to look at health and education, unemployment and crime, and the environmental issues. So what I've done here is I've left you some notes, which I'll just click on and show you what this looks like. So lots of detailed notes on all these. You definitely don't want all of it, but you might want to pull bits and pieces out to save you doing your own research. I've also, the textbook, I've left you page numbers for that. So if you look on page 154, for instance, you've got healthcare, you've got the problem. For instance, some areas, when you're looking at life expectancy, City of God in the west is 45 compared with some of the wealthier areas, which is 80. So you've got a massive problem with healthcare and life expectancy in different places. And so, but how the book does it is it looks at the challenge and then looks at the solutions. So why and how big is the challenge? And then what is being put in place? How far have they solved it? To what extent are the solutions working? So what I'd like you to do this lesson is work through using my notes as a model of how to approach it, these bullet points, so you're clear on how this growth has created challenges. Clearly a big 9 marker might ask you a very open question about these challenges, and then you can select 2 or 3 of those. Or you could get a question just on something like that, and it's got to be one project, not the whole city, so make sure you've got that straight. Okay, so I hope that's clear. If you've got any questions, obviously get in contact. I'll set up another meeting shortly so we can have a chat about some of this stuff if we're stuck. or if you're stuck. Okay, and I hope that works for you. And as I say, you can supplement this with internet research, but most of the stuff is in the textbooks or at least on the notes and the web links which are on here. Okay, I'll see you soon, and I hope you're all well.